Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. While we're joining, you can introduce yourself in the chat and your business. Thank you for joining this afternoon. Welcome. My name is Taya Brown. I am the administrative coordinator here at the Temple SBDC. The Temple SBDC helps small businesses start, grow, and succeed. We do this through our no-cost consulting and a variety of our no-cost webinars and training programs like you're attending today. You're joining us for an introduction to AI for your small business. This session will be recorded. You will receive a follow-up email with the slide deck as well as with the recording. Now I will turn over the floor to Isabel Crow.
Hi, welcome everybody. We are here today, as Taya said, for introduction to AI for your small business. Taya, can you be on waiting room duty? I see a few people still hanging out in the waiting room. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you haven't yet worked with the SBDC, welcome. We are very happy to be part of a statewide network and a nationwide network of small business development centers. We've been working in Philadelphia, Montgomery counties since 1983. Our mission is to help small businesses start, grow, and prosper. Because we are going to be numerous today, we are going to be, I think 50 plus people. We are asking everybody to remain on mute. So if unless you are actively asking a question, and even so, please put that into the chat and I will unmute you. Let's see, my work here at the SBDC is I'm one of our small business consultants. I work one-on-one with business owners on a variety of topics. Our consulting services are available to entrepreneurs in our territory at no cost. We work on a variety of topics, and we work with businesses in a variety of stages of development. As I said, please join up in listen-only mode here. I just got a couple of ideas of the kinds of topics we work on in our individual consulting engagements. Aside from our one-on-one consulting, we also have a variety of training webinars like this one, as well as additional programming, and you can learn more about all of this on our website. Here's a little bit about me if you're curious. I've been with the SBDC for 3+ years now, and I've been working with small businesses for about 11 years in the Philadelphia area on a lot of things. And most recently, my favorite topic is the one we're here to talk about today, which is how to utilize emerging AI technology in your small business. So my goals for today, I always like to start with my objectives, so you know what we're doing. My goals for today are to help everybody here understand the essentials of what powers generative AI, give a brief overview of history and of the technology, identify risks around AI usage and learn how to manage them. And I'd like you all to leave with at least one viable use case for generative AI in your small business. I love a poll. I'm going to run a quick poll just to help me understand who is in the room. So that's on your screen. I'm curious, how long have you been in business? If you wouldn't mind giving me a quick answer. We'll leave that up for a few seconds. So the way it's all gonna go here. I'm gonna talk at you for a while, giving you an overview of these technologies, their history, all that good stuff, risks, and how to manage them. We're going to go into a breakout room and do some exercises together, get you all using this technology. We are recording the session today, and you will receive both the deck and I believe a link to the recording. And then I see somebody in the chat is a security researcher, which is fantastic. And that brings me to my next poll. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up because we've got most people who participated, and it's a really nice mix. If you're curious who's in the room, we got a real nice split between established businesses, pre-venture, and startups, which I love. My next question is, how familiar would you say you are with AI tools and technology? Are you total newcomer, here to learn, expert, use it all the time, anywhere in between? No wrong answers here. We did design the deck for people who are on the, on the earlier end of things, a little bit newer to these tools. So bear that in mind if you're listening with more of an expert ear. But happy to have everybody in the room. And if you have something to contribute, a point that maybe I'm not making, that you think is really important, or something you'd like to add, do please feel free to put that in the chat. And you're all very welcome. If it's been a little while since you used the chat um, in the Zoom call, just put a little message in there. So you should see a little pop up wherever your Zoom controls are that show up. So if that's you, please do feel free to say hello in the chat and add anything that you would like to, as Kyle has already done. Thank you, Kyle. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. I think I have a decent sense of who's here. Um, so like I said, this is just a quick poll to give me a sense of who we are in the room and where is our kind of our expertise. And it looks like most of us are newer. We do have a couple experts, which I love, keeps me on my toes. And like I said, if you have questions, if I'm not being clear, drop them in the chat. We've got my excellent colleague Taya here to moderate. She'll make sure that we spot those questions and that we answer them. And if you are on the expert end, and you have an extra point to share, or a resource to share, further reading, chime in. All right. Um, so that's really helpful. And we've reviewed our learning objectives today. Quick question. You can just do a show of hands if you would. Who already has an account with a generative AI like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, one of the large language models, ideally? And you can just raise your hand, that'd be enough. I'm asking because when we do breakout activities, I want to make sure we have somebody in each of those breakout rooms who has access to one of those accounts. So bringing those names up for a second. I'm taking a quick note. Okay, and thank you for your patience. I'm seeing we've got a couple of folks trickling in. So if you'd missed our housekeeping, we are here for Introduction to AI for Your Small Business. And I'm asking folks who already has an account, you can raise your hand, with one of these generative AI tools, and you can use there's a reaction is how you raise your hands. Okay, that should be plenty. And the reason I'm asking is because I want to make sure that there's somebody in each of the breakout rooms who has um, an account that you can use, because we are going to be using these tools later on in a group setting. So if you don't already have an account, I want to make sure you're in a group with somebody that does. You get it. You get it. Um, it's a React button along the bottom of your Zoom window, or the top, wherever your Zoom controls are. But I think I have plenty. So we'll move on from there. Thank you all for that. That was really helpful. Okay, you can drop your hands now. All right, so I'm going to start off. This is a little bit of a joke, but before we get into how all of this works, I just kind of want to make the case for why it matters. A lot of my conversations with clients who are, unfamiliar but curious about this technology are around kind of, do I have to pay attention to this? So here's why you should. Some numbers here. Now, these all came from, if unless otherwise cited from Google's Copilot, Google's Gemini um, rollout, some surveys that they did around that. So, according to a survey that Google did, 49% of small business owners plan to incorporate AI tools into their businesses in the next year. 75% of small businesses reported that having employees with AI skills could provide a competitive advantage. So you see that difference there. Businesses that aren't considering it are still saying we'd love to employ somebody who could who could utilize this technology. Now, on the other end of the size of the business sizes, 92% of Fortune 500 companies are using or experimenting with AI. and that's 65% of everybody else. Um, so, um, it's there's a bit of a disconnect, right, between what the larger companies are doing with AI and how interested and experimental they are with it, and how everybody else is using it, and especially small businesses. Less than 4% of small businesses report feeling that they're using AI tools effectively to the best advantage. So there's an opportunity here, right? Um, and that's why we're here. That's why we're prioritizing this in our programming, because we think there's the risk is not just will you are you failing to gain a competitive advantage over others, but also could you be risking not keeping up, right? Um, What are we hearing from those early adopters who are already using this technology? Well, we're hearing that these are the big areas where AI is supporting them in their small business. 69% of small businesses utilizing AI observed sales growth, sustained sales growth, even in the challenging conditions we've seen in the past couple of years. Research from Accenture suggests that AI could boost small business productivity by up to 40%. And there's a survey that by Salesforce that found that 51% of small businesses using AI have reported that it's a time savings on some of the routine tasks in their business. And, after all, what could be more valuable than your time? The most prevalent productivity gain people report comes from generative AI's ability to compile and summarize data, which frees up the operator to focus on creativity and decision making. So this is kind of um, the standard line, that we're hearing from people, is that that generative AI is helping them to automate or make routine some of the boring tasks in their business and allow them to focus on things that are more important, um, that require strategic thinking or creativity. And if you are in that collection of people who are operating a small business currently, you know that the value of your time as the business owner is really significant. You only have 24 hours in the day, and there's always something else to be doing. So looking at this tool as a time saver, there's real advantages there. So how does it work? Here's what we're all here to learn about, right? By the way, if you have questions, do please feel free to put them in the chat. If you dropped in late and you didn't hear me say that, I really welcome your questions. If there's vocabulary I'm using that you're not familiar with, a reference I make that doesn't make sense to you, let me know. All right, so how does it work? I want to start off by saying what generative AI is not. If those of you of a certain age may remember 2001: A Space Odyssey and HAL 9000, no one will keep you from opening those pod bay doors, right? We are not yet in a position where generative AI is controlling any aspect of our lives, nor is it sentient or able to know things. It is not an entity with feelings, knowledge, or frankly common sense. It is also not magic, and it is not resource free. It has no consciousness, but running an AI model uses processing power, it uses memory. There are real resource costs associated with generative AI that we should consider as we're thinking about the risks and ethical concerns. But the one thing I want to kind of point out here, I'm hopefully about to demystify some of the way that AI works, so that that when we get into the demonstration phase, you have a sense of what it can and cannot do, because it can do some very impressive things, but there are some real weaknesses, as well as some security and ethical concerns. All right, so what is it then? I've just spent a lot of time telling you what it's not. What is it, right? So artificial intelligence is the science of creating machines that are capable of performing tasks that would typically require human intelligence. That's like, how the dictionary defines artificial intelligence. And this is a concept that dates back, at least to the 1950s, arguably earlier, right? I mean, Ada Lovelace was working on, computational machines in the 19th century. Early AI in the 50s relied on rule-based systems where every scenario and response would be mapped out by the programmers. And then in the 80s and 90s, we decided it would be smart to teach a machine how to learn things and how to create those rules themselves. And that science is called machine learning. And the goal was to help computers learn from data rather than rely on pre-programmed rules. So instead of explicitly telling a machine how to recognize patterns, machine learning algorithms are trained on large data sets, and those machine learning algorithms actually develop their own methods for identifying trends or making predictions. So this shift really revolutionary, and it happened in the early teens, in that time frame, and it enabled systems to improve over time and adapt to new information without having to be explicitly programmed to understand that information. So applications like spam filters, recommendation engines, speech recognition, all kinds of things became possible thanks to machine learning. And machine learning algorithms were present in technology that you've probably been using for, if not a decade, like maybe more. So if you use, Spotify or YouTube, or if you use any kind of service that offers you recommendations for what to listen to next, that's using machine learning algorithms to recognize patterns in your consumption and recommend things that it thinks you might like. Um, I am absolutely going to talk about phones with AI, John. I like that question. I have a few more. I have a few more points where we're going to get to it. And your question at the end: how would it be used for business? That's the main thing we're going to talk about. And after I get through this, what is it slide? So machine learning algorithms, were a big breakthrough, and then after machine, in that same vein, there was a breakthrough around neural networks, which are algorithms that are inspired by the structure of the human brain. Neural networks consist of layers of interconnected nodes. That's that diagram I've got there with all the connections. And they process information by mimicking how neurons in the brain communicate. Neural networks were conceptualized in the early days of AI, but never really became workable until the 2000s because we didn't have the computing power and the data availability to make them, widespread. These two technologies combine machine learning and neural networks in deep learning, which uses many layers to analyze complex data, and that's what makes advancements like image recognition and natural language processing possible. Generative AI is one of the latest frontiers in AI, and that's what you're probably thinking of when you joined this webinar. And we're going to talk about generative AI next. Generative AI is when an artificial intelligence model creates new content rather than just pulling data that already exists and spitting it back out at you. It's actually creating new things: images, text, music, even video. There are multiple kinds of generative AI. The one we're going to be focusing on the most, I would say, is text-based generative AI, or large language models like ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude. Image-based generative AI is also out there. There's, ChatGPT has integrated some image-based GPTs in some of their tiers of service. DALL-E is kind of what was one of the big name brand ones. Gemini can do image-based generative AI. Audio-based generative AI is really interesting. That's if you've seen the movie Her, right? That's when an AI can speak or produce audio. And it's what powers one of the really cool ways you can interact with ChatGPT, which is talking to it and hearing it talk back. Code-based generative AI, generative AI can produce can write code. My software engineer husband tells me the code it produces right now is still pretty clunky, but certainly it's a great tool if you're learning how to code. Um, Generative AI can make movies, and it can make music and all kinds of things. And more than that, AI-powered features are integrating into all kinds of existing platforms, like to your point, John, phones, right? And into all kinds of other things that we're using. I see a really interesting exchange in the chat that I'm not able to follow while I'm also, leading the session. It looks like there's been a great back and forth between a couple folks on generative AI in phones, and I see your question, Richard, about recommendations and learning paths for prompt engineering, creating AI-based applications. I love that you've connected with Kyle. I think there's a lot there to talk about. But Richard, feel free to email me and I can share some specific recommendations. Same, Zakia, same to you. If you'd like me to share specific suggestions, as an intro overview, Google has a decent introduction. There's plenty of stuff on LinkedIn Learning, and you can also, there's uh, lots and lots and lots of people who are putting together content around how to get around exactly the topic we're talking about today, which is how to learn more about these technologies. My email address is in the chat if you want to email me any specific questions for follow-up. You want me to recommend reading or next steps or anything. We are going to talk mostly today about large language models. So these are, your ChatGPT, your Copilot. These are um, uh, uh, generative AI models that have been pre-trained on data, on huge data sets, arguably like the whole internet, that are that you communicate to using plain language, and they spit out outputs in natural language. Their natural language processing is what they do well. So think of pre-trained large language models like the ones I've mentioned. I like to think of them as enthusiastic interns. That's an easy way to explain it for folks, that kind of gets your head around their limitations. Have any of you ever had or worked in an office with a really enthusiastic intern who maybe had a lot of academic knowledge, but not a lot of experience or common sense, didn't know, your business, or didn't know, what's really going on in the real world? Um, Anybody know ever met an intern like that? So an enthusiastic intern can make content that looks right? But they don't know they don't know anything except what you give them and what they learned in school, which can be useful, but may not always be fully accurate or up to date. So it can make content that looks right, but you should always be checking. You should always be double checking what your large language model puts out, because they make stuff up. They have no common sense. They don't know. They might know, what's true for childcare industry, but they don't know what's going on in your daycare center, right? So the more information you give your very enthusiastic intern, and the more specific your request, and the better your kind of controls and proofreading, the more effectively you'll be able to use that enthusiastic intern energy to save you time and get work done. All right, so that's my favorite analogy for large language models, because truly they do not fundamentally know anything, right? Their goal is to make content that looks right, just like the YouTube algorithm's goal is to keep your eyeballs on YouTube, not to like find the most interesting thing or to educate you. It's to keep you clicking and watching, right? A large language model's goal is to create something that looks right. Now, looking right and being right, not the same thing, right? So knowing that that's a big weakness, what can you do? What can you do with these? You can use a large language model that's, up to date and trained in marketing, to do basic market research, to strategize and plan, to generate content. You can take a GPT thread and give it all kinds of information about your business, and we'll talk about the ways to do this that we recommend. You don't just want to be sharing all your confidential information with a generative AI for reasons we'll get into, but you can, if you're careful about it, train an AI mentor on your business and have it get to know what you do very, very well, so that it can give you advice that's, you're training that intern to get to know your business very well, so that at the end of the internship, right, it's able to uh, contribute and be useful. Um, and I've seen really interesting stuff come out of that. I've seen, somebody had a client of mine had anonymized their financial records, or all their client that their who's all of their financial records, and had trained an AI on their financials, and that AI thread was able to give them, okay, here are your most lucrative clients. Here's the clients who always pay late. Here's the kind of, here's the kind of project that's most profitable for your business. And here's, helped them really strategize around where to focus their business development efforts to make them, to have the best impact on the business. In contracting, there's really interesting stuff. If you do any B2B contracting, you can feed one of those RFPs that are often quite long into a large language model and ask it to, evaluate this for whether it's a good fit for your business, or bring out the, summarize the eligibility criteria and the application process, or the evaluation criteria if that's provided. You can ask it for an outline for a proposal and punch that up in, or give it your proposal and ask it to, you know proofread or copy edit. um, in operations, it can be really helpful for scheduling and other logistics, using either a custom trained AI that you've maybe given, your foot traffic data, and you're asking it, okay, what's the busiest shifts? Create it, and I have, 5 team members, create a shift schedule for the next 2 weeks. You can give it a lot of things. Um, and there's also a lot of out-of-the-box tools that require less training to be useful in operations. Kyle's got a great point here that you can exacerbate the biases that are inherent in systems. Like, absolutely. There's a great example of AI being used in HR screening systems that have been taught, here's a bunch of applications and the successful applicant in previous cases. Whatever bias was inherent in the selection process in those examples that it's been given, it's going to replicate in its recommendations. So if there was a hiring team that was, had a bias towards white male candidates, and then all of their previous work is fed into an AI powered HR screener, that AI powered HR screening system is going to have those same biases and preferences. So absolutely, I love that European law is prohibiting AI in HR decision making, and it's definitely a place where that time, the small amount of time that you save, um, is outweighed by the risk of missing out on really qualified candidates because of an AI bias. So there's plenty of places where I wouldn't recommend kind of a homebrew, doing it yourself with a custom trained, GPT. And I would recommend you look at out of the box tools where there's a vendor who's managing, the training data and ensuring that there's quality checks. And we'll talk about kind of vendor selection a little bit later on. But yeah, those are some examples of what you can do with it. How does it work, right? If you haven't yet used a large language model, they're made to understand natural language. So they're very easy to interact with. You give them prompts, meaning you ask for what you want via typing or talking into the model, and they produce outputs. And then it's a conversation, it's a thread, like a text thread. So you can ask for any changes or edits that you need to that output until you find, the something that's workable. We generally don't recommend that you use, copy and paste from what it's giving you into what you need, that you're, examining its output for inaccuracies, for, places where it's making things up about your business and operations. But, you know, uh, uh, fundamentally, they're quite easy to use, as you'll see when we get into our demonstration. I want to do a couple of kind of myth busting, true or false things on this next slide. Um, I want you to raise your hands for, everybody found the react button earlier, right? Okay. So I want you to use the react button. Go ahead and bring that up. And I'd love for you to react with a thumbs up for true and a thumbs down for false. Does AI know everything? Thumbs up for true, thumbs down for false. Gave you a gimme to start off with. Yeah, okay, lots of thumbs down. Awesome, awesome. No one's thumbs upping. Perfect. Don't thumbs up that. It's it's not not does not know everything. Absolutely. In fact, it doesn't know anything, right? It knows nothing because it isn't sentient. It's only as up to date as the content that it's been trained on and any content that you give it. Note that a lot of the freemium AI models may not be fully up to date in their training data, so it might not even have access to, the most recent kind of current events and things. Um, is ChatGPT really bad at math? Thumbs up for true, thumbs down for false. Right? It's a robot. Why would it be bad at math? In fact, I'll let you all answer this one. Give it a second. Is it bad at math? Thumbs up for it's bad at math, thumbs down for it's not bad at math. Okay, going once, going twice. A lot of thumbs downs. Okay, this one's actually true. Generative AI and most large language models are terrible at arithmetic and counting. They can analyze data sets, but don't ask them to add 4 plus 10. They're bad at arithmetic. If you want to, test this, go into ChatGPT and ask it to count the number of R's in strawberry, or ask it a simple arithmetic problem. It's not really good at that, right? Because what it's good at is making an answer look right. They're not checking to see if it is right. For whatever reason, basic arithmetic and counting is a real weakness for a lot of these large language models like ChatGPT. Will AI take all of our jobs? I know this. I'm reducing this to a very flippant. This is not an easy answer, but who thinks true AI will take all our jobs? Who thinks false it won't take all our jobs? Okay, a lot of false. Not going to take all our jobs. I definitely think it will take a lot of our jobs. It will change the way we work, for sure. While it can automate certain tasks and that will reduce the need for many jobs. It will also, it also creates new ones that didn't exist before. The future of work is likely going to look like humans leveraging AI assistants. But we've already seen, and I've seen, in the last couple of days, reports of, major layoffs in certain fields. Customer service is a big one. The customer service chatbots are not terrible. I mean, they're not the full answer. They're still quite imperfect and require a lot of monitoring. But, the days of, huge call centers being the main way that we offer customer service, probably numbered. So it will absolutely be changing how we work. And to your point, Carlene, it will need a human to operate. It absolutely does. But, one person or, a small tier of people who are functioning as that tier 2 in customer support, where every tier 1, first line of customer service is automated, that's likely kind of the way we're moving. So that's a big reduction in jobs. It will change how we work, and it will eliminate certain kinds of jobs or significantly reduce the number of those certain kinds of jobs. However, it creates new ones. And the best thing that we can do, I think this is a little bit of a Pandora's box. The technology is out there. We're not really going back, right? So we can think about, you know, how we want our regulators to engage, and what kinds of safeguards we want to put in place, but we can also individually be, learning as much as we can about how to use these tools, and you know, finding those ways that we can keep up. I liken it a little bit to the Industrial Revolution, right? Where a lot of industries were completely changed. Now, those jobs came back, but there was a real impact, and that's coming. Um, Question, Kyle's monitoring all these questions and answering. Thank you, Kyle. Once you create the end product from ChatGPT, is it possible to save the document? Absolutely. You're going to cut what copy and paste what you use, and you should absolutely, Kyle, I completely agree. You should absolutely be reviewing and editing the outputs, and you can do that in any of your, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, anything you like, that's a text editor. And even the ChatGPT even has like a button you can click to copy the output, to make it really easy for you to copy and paste it. All right, so that was my myth busting. We've gotten into this a little bit, but I definitely don't want to skip risks and ethical concerns, because there are some real risks and ethical concerns. Now, we've talked about how easy to use they are, and how time-saving AI tools can be, and all that is really true. But like with any new technology, I mean, can you picture, before cars were around, that we didn't have traffic lights, we didn't have speed limits, we didn't have, right of way rules, right? So we've got to think about how we're going to be building our businesses, our workflows, our operations to put those safeguards into place, because regulation is lagging behind the broader world in this technology at this point. And to Kyle's point, well, the EU doesn't allow you to use AI in HR decision making. It's still in use in the US. It's totally widespread. If you've been applying for jobs, your applications have been screened by AI. So some of these risks and ethical concerns, it's on us as business owners to be aware of them and factoring them into our plans. So privacy is a big risk. We've talked about this already, but freemium models like ChatGPT and others are typically using user data as training data. Anything you type into a large language model can become kind of additional data for that large language model to be trained on to make it, more, better at comprehending natural language and responding appropriately. So because of this, we never want to put any confidential or customer information into an AI model unless it's a closed environment where we have some assurance of confidentiality. And so that's typically going to be paid, right? You're likely not going to find a free AI model that is secure, where you can feel comfortable sharing confidential information. If you're not paying for it, you are part of the product in many cases. And yes, ChatGPT right now allows you to toggle your content. That's it. Didn't always. That's a relatively new feature, I think, Kyle. But yeah, great point. You can toggle your consent to be trained in the privacy settings. But even then, um, our best practice is unless you're paying for access to a closed environment, you should be um, you know, as a practice, not sharing anything confidential or personally identifying um, or customer personal information into an AI model. I'm going to go back to my enthusiastic intern on this one, accuracy and quality. Remember, we're thinking of generative AIs, large language models, as very enthusiastic interns who have a lot of energy and a lot of book knowledge, but not a ton of actual experience or common sense. So we want to always be reviewing AI created content, editing it. And when I say review it, I mean like read every word, right? If you see a statement of fact that you cannot personally verify, it's probably smart to go look that up or ask your generative AI for a source, which you can, many of them you can ask it to cite a source for a fact. And then with those sources that you're given, the internet is now full of AI generated websites that, may not be the most reliable sources. So don't just take because there's a source that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a reliable source. So we're going to be trusting but verifying. And then be wary of legal or technical advice that you cannot verify yourself. I really like the going back to the metaphor of AI enthusiastic intern for this. Like, would you take an intern's investment advice? Probably not, right? Would you take would you take an intern's tips on engineering or construction or safety? Probably not, right? On the other hand, there are some kinds of legal documents where, there are many, many, many boilerplate examples online, and maybe that's a place where you feel comfortable trusting an AI output. Personally, I'm proceeding with real caution on anything technical or legal that I'm getting out of an AI. It's kind of not where I'm going for those kinds of things. So remember that the AI large language model does not have any common sense. It does not actually know anything. Certainly does not know your business. So the place I see this a lot is people who use ChatGPT to write business plans and then don't necessarily read the plans that they're given. And so I see business plans that say things that are just not possible about a business, right? I know I'm talking to a client who is yet to start their business, and the business plan that they've written or that ChatGPT has written is telling me that they have, um, 3 locations around the country and a staff of 500 people, and they're asking for an initial investment of $200 million. Well, I don't think you read that output, right? Read it and edit. Um, and we'll talk just in a little bit about how I think it's possible to effectively utilize a large language model in business planning, because there's a way to do it, but that way is not to ask ChatGPT, hey, write a business plan for, a cleaning company. That's not enough context. That intern's going to take that and run with it. It's going to make a lot of assumptions. It's going to make a lot of mistakes. And then unless you're reviewing it for accuracy, you're not going to catch them. And the person who reads it is going to have questions that maybe you might not be ready to answer. So accuracy and quality is a risk that we mitigate by proofreading, right? Privacy is a risk that we mitigate by paying for closed environments if we need to, and being very cautious around sharing confidential or customer information. Plagiarism or copyright infringement is a risk. Um, if you're using an AI to create images or to create creative content, make sure you're asking it to cite your sources so that you're aware of any potentially copyrighted material that's being used without attribution. And then where possible, make the work your own. That's the way to mitigate that plagiarism or copyright infringement risk. I should say I'm hosted by a university. If you are in a classroom setting and you're using generative AI to do your work without being told explicitly to use generative AI to do your work, yeah, that is going to run afoul of most universities and educational institutions' plagiarism policies. Probably don't do that. Just a note. I have to say it because I'm hosted by a university. Go ahead and don't use generative AI to write your papers. Um, you know, you're not going to learn anything that way, right? The other risk that's a very real one for those of us who are thinking of using generative AI for marketing is that some customers are very against AI generated content, especially AI generated pictures. That's very obvious. It's a little bit harder to tell AI generated text if you're if you're copy editing and proofing it and kind of making it your own, but it's very easy to tell when it's an AI generated image. I mean, less easy, but often people can tell. And a lot of customers are, there might be a backlash if they see you using AI generated imagery in your marketing. Now, you know your customer base better than I do. Some customer bases won't care. Others very, very much will be offended. Anybody whose customer base includes folks in creative fields, mm, don't use this to create marketing images or social media images, because they'll be able to tell and they'll be offended. Um, Generative AI is often being used to train, Wikipedia, to your question, Bradley. Wikipedia is one of the major places that training data for large language models is coming from. But there's a lot of discourse in, if you look at any specific page, there's people who are, editors who are trying to prevent, generative AI produced output being used without proper sourcing in Wikipedia. So it's not the same as generative AI, and it's not necessarily intentionally using generative AI. Um, Okay, but you would treat it like generative AI because you want to fact check. Yeah, I would say that's probably fair, right? You want to go to the sources on a Wikipedia page. So that's, um, very similar to what, how we were all told to use Wikipedia when it first came out if you were in school in those days. Not to date myself if the 2001 Space Odyssey reference didn't date me. Um, um, so those are some of the risks. The last one I want to talk about, thank you, Hal. Yeah, I can't do that. Um, there's a big environmental concern that we don't necessarily always talk about with generative AI. Like I said earlier, generative AI is not magic. It's not free. There are, real resources involved in training, especially in training larger AI models. And this translates to, a lot of electricity and a lot of water being used to cool data centers. So for small businesses, you might be inadvertently adding to your carbon footprint if you're going to be leaning on AI models. Um, and it really depends on the service provider that you're choosing. Um, beyond the training phase, operating an AI on an ongoing basis, each interaction you have does use resources, computational resources, electricity, water for cooling data centers. Um, and the hardware required for AI, specialized chips and servers, has environmental implications, and its own kind of supply chain issues, right? So um, we would really recommend that you evaluate the vendors you're choosing, not just for how cost effective they are, but for their sustainability practices, and kind of think about that as you're using these services. I think of it a little bit like, like water in my home. I might, I use ChatGPT a fair amount, and I use Gemini and Copilot and Claude, from time to time. But I'm not, just like I use water all the time in my home to like wash a dish or brush my teeth or to drink it, right? And if I need it, I need it, right? I'm hoping that the water company and the infrastructure that we have in place is going to alert me if I need to change my practices there. We are going to be relying on our AI vendors to be um, to be prioritizing energy efficient data centers, looking at carbon offsetting programs, looking at, the actual infrastructure behind these generative AI tools and these data centers with an eye to sustainability. But we as consumers can sometimes influence that kind of thing. So by making informed choices and kind of voting with our dollars a bit. So just a small plug for the environment with generative AI. Um, So some tips and tricks, and then we'll get into actually using it if I haven't discouraged all of you. So the prompt, like I said, what you put into a large language model is called a prompt. There's a whole field called prompt engineering that's all about optimizing the language that you use so that you get the output that you want. Here's a very basic overview of that large field. Prompt engineering. Number one tip, be specific. Ask it for what you want. Consider giving it a role like advisor, mentor, banker, and provide enough context to actually get a useful result. Like I said, help me plan my business. You're going to get a lot of nonsense, going to make a lot of assumptions and do a lot of guesses to make it look like a business plan, right? But if you give it those pieces already, what you get back can be, closer to usable. The difference between help me plan my business and I'm an aspiring fashion designer creating my own line of handbags for sale online. My target audience is women 22 to 40 with office jobs and a preference for cruelty-free fashion. Write an industry analysis for my business plan. Now it's going to be looking at the demographics of that age group. It's going to be looking at, um, trends in cruelty-free fashion. It's going to be looking at handbags specifically and e-commerce as opposed to brick and mortar. There's a lot of stuff that it's going to be doing in that plan that's going to be better because you gave it all that context. Play around with your prompt. Don't be afraid to ask for something, ask something a couple of different ways. Don't be afraid to ask for something more than once. If you're asking, if you're doing something where you're asking it to, you're using it to kind of to ideate, give me, a list of taglines for an upcoming, social media post, and you want to have 3 captions that are good, you could ask it for 10 and kind of don't use the ones that are, choose the 3 best. So there's a lot with prompt engineering. There's a lot that we're not going to cover today. We might be offering a prompt engineering specific webinar at some point. So there is absolutely such a thing as too much context. Very true, Kyle, because the way that a large language model interprets your prompt large language models use something called tokens. It breaks up the language that you're using into tokens. And, just like it predicted text on your phone where it like will predict the end of your word or maybe the next word in your sentence, they're predicting the next token in the output based on the tokens that it got out of your prompt. So you can give it too much. You'll find that sweet spot as you experiment with it. One thing we're really recommending, and this is a tip I have later on, is that you work in chunks so that you're giving it just the context it needs for one part of a larger work instead of asking it for that whole larger work first, so that you can And if you do this all in the same thread, the model will remember the context and remember previous prompts and responses, so you can manage that issue of too much. What is an LLM? Thank you for asking, Markia. It's large language model like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. These are large language models. They're an generative AI type that is designed to interpret natural language, like a prompt, what you type into it, like you're talking to, another person, and produce outputs in natural language rather than in, code or images or music or anything like that. So that's one of my best tips, is to chunk things out. And then the other ones, know your platform. How up to date are its training materials? Have you paid for a closed environment, or will it use your conversations as additional training material? Did you toggle that switch in ChatGPT saying don't use what I'm giving you as training materials? Because one of the important things that we do with large language models is they're trained on a bunch of data, and then they're kind of quality checked on other kinds of data. um yeah, it's what people use instead of AI because there's no real intelligence there. So there's a constant need for additional training data to continuously improve and keep these large language models from drifting, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. The other thing is, can your model cite sources? If you ask it for sources, can it provide links to where it's actually getting the information that it's using as it produces the response? Some of them can, not all of them can. For instance, the free version of ChatGPT cannot, the paid version can. You can ask the AI model these questions directly if you're not sure, which is a nice tip. Um, this is the one I'm going to. Yeah, Gemini absolutely does. Yeah, Gemini does. And then just like the Gemini responses that come up as the first thing in Google searches now, they're often sourced. Human in the loop is the kind of, if you take nothing else away from this class, take away human in the loop. Human in the loop means that you're letting the AI or the large language model do your work, but not your thinking. You are always reviewing. You're keeping that human in the loop so that you're um, monitoring the output for inaccuracies. With automated tasks, you're not just setting and forgetting. You are, because again, there no common sense, no there no actual knowledge, no experience. So you want to make sure that there's a quality control, that there's a human in the loop, and that if the task is automated, that any outliers are escalated for human review. And you want to watch for this concept called drift is what happens when you ask an AI model. Drift is what happens when large language models or other AI models are left to kind of operate on their own for too long. For instance, have you ever, YouTube algorithm, the predictive algorithm that YouTube uses, it uses AI technology to look at your preferences and predict content that you might like. Again, YouTube is optimizing for keeping you on the platform. Has anybody ever fallen asleep watching a YouTube video and woken up watching some completely nonsense like off the wall thing that you never would have wanted? That's drift, right? That's the prediction model keeping you engaged, and it's going off in a totally different direction. So you want to make sure that if there's, if you're using an AI vendor and you're to automate a task, that you're checking in to see if that task is still getting done to your standards. Um, yeah, and YouTube is great at that in a terrifying way. So we're watching for drift. All right, and then we just talked about chunk it out. For long form content, it's really ideal to compose and edit in smaller sections or chunks, all in the same thread ideally, so the model will have all that context. Remember, previous prompts and responses, the information you give it, in that previous conversation will be used later on. But it gives you more control, enables you to give more details in your prompts without overloading it and giving it too much detail, because as Kyle pointed out, that has negative repercussions as well. And it gives you more control over the editing process. Right? It's easier to edit in smaller chunks, and we always, if we haven't made this point clear enough, we always got to be editing what these AI tools give us. All right, I'm going to take a break for questions, and we are going to do a breakout session after this. So Nelson, I will be providing an example. In fact, you will be providing an example in this next stage of things. So we've taken questions throughout, but I'd love, examples for chunks. Okay, so like for instance, if you're writing a business plan, right? Using AI to write your business plan. You might not say, hey, write me a business plan for this kind of business. You might say, um, I want I would like the um, customer persona section of my business plan. I have a focus on customers between this age and this age with these kinds of buying habits who want this kind of thing. I'm located in this geographical area. Write up, the marketing section of my business plan for me, or write up, ask it for a specific thing. Write up what is an operation section of a business plan of this kind of industry typically look like? Give me an outline. So that's what I mean by kind of going in chunks. Um, so I'm going to be creating breakout rooms in 1 second. I'm going to make sure that each breakout room has one of those people who raised their hands saying that they have access to um, an AI, a generative AI account. Um, and great question. Can you upload 20-page report for it to edit? You can. Will it do a good job editing it? It'll do a better job if you upload it in smaller chunks and you ask it for specific, for some specific editing task. Like, hey, I want you to, I would like you to review this for grammar and spelling versus I want you to review this for tone. And giving it smaller chunks will get better results. Um, so hopefully that helps. And the difference between Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude 3.5, great question. Um, what is the difference between Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude 3.5? So these are different large language models. They've been trained by each of these companies, Google, OpenAI, and I forget the company behind Claude. I think it might just be called Claude. Those are all they are large language models that are not the same. They've been trained in different ways, and they respond differently. Fundamentally, they're all large language models, so they don't, there's not a huge difference between what they'll give you, but certain thing, they will give you different anthropic. Thank you. They will give you, you'll see a slight variation in what you're given. Um, so hopefully that answers your questions. What is the best for a consulting small business? It depends on what your use case for the AI is, right? I mean, and I would say, um, it may be that what would be most useful to you isn't going to be a large language model. Maybe you really want a CRM that with AI integration that can help use AI to qualify leads. If you want it to, if you're going to be using, the large language model to create client focused materials, maybe you're going to experiment with them and find the one that gives you the best, um, the best outputs for your specific case. What are some examples of other models? I'm hearing a lot about large language models. What are some examples of other models and what do they do? Great question, Zacchaeus. So we are focusing on large language models right now because they're the most accessible to start off with, and I think in a lot of cases the most useful. There's also image-based generative AIs that create images. You may have heard of DALL-E. A couple of the kind of most well-known large language models also do image generation as well. Um, and there's a fair amount of stuff that they do. That, image generation, code generation, um, music generation, audio generation. Some of these can produce sound. So there's a fair amount. Um, Good question. Any others anybody has? Um, Deep learning. Yeah. Um, so what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna open a breakout room. Oh yeah, go ahead. One last question, Nelson. Go ahead. I'll take your question whenever you've got it, Nelson. What daily habits do you recommend for us to practice using AI? Interesting. I don't know that I have a daily habit to recommend so much as I would recommend that you spend some time um, experimenting in either this program or on your own time, and that you maybe find some outlet, some whether it's somebody on LinkedIn, um, somebody who on Instagram or YouTube who is an industry leader in your field with expertise in AI that can keep you up to date on changes in the regulatory environment, emerging tools and use cases. Find somebody to follow with some expertise that's specific to your field. Um, a couple of other questions here. We mentioned lead generation. What about lead qualification? What about lead generation? Not awesome at lead generation because again, they don't know anything, although there's certainly um, companies that are using, AI powered output as lead generators, as lead magnets. Um, Great question from Zeno. Why do some of these images look real and others look like cartoons? Because all it does is make something that looks right based on what you're giving it. If you ask it for a more realistic image versus a more cartoonish image, that will change what you get out of it. And yeah, I love that Kyle's recommendation. Um, yeah, it's a big field. This is very much a beginning intro level. What I'd like to do is spend some time in breakout rooms these practicing using these tools. So what I'm going to do, there's about 65 of us here, so I'm going to open about 7 rooms, and I'd like everybody to pick a room based on the document you like to create. We're going to be using generative AI to create one of these 3 documents, either a marketing plan for your business, an onboarding plan for an employee, or the executive summary of a business plan. So think about which of those documents is most likely something that you might create for your business and pick a breakout room that corresponds to that choice. I'm going to ask for, when you get into the room, find somebody with an existing account on ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, one of these tools, who's willing to screen share, and then work collaboratively using these prompt tips that we've talked about uh, to go through and actually create an output together. And we're going to come back and share what worked, what didn't work, and then we'll if there's time, we'll take a live example and do it together. I'm going to go ahead and open rooms. You're going to be following. You're going to be picking the rooms that you'd like. Executive summary of a business plan. So that's that high level overview of the rest of the plan. So we're not asking it to create an entire business plan. You can if you'd like to, if that's what your group agrees to do. But here we're experimenting with how can we use a large language model to create one of these 3 documents that most businesses will need at some point. If you're in business for yourself, you're going to be using one of these 3 kinds of documents in your business at some point. So we're going to use generative AI to write one, and I'm going to open all the rooms. You get to pick which room you can see them all pop up. There's 2 rooms per kind of plan. If you need me to help you pick, I'm happy to, but click, marketing plan room 1, marketing plan 2, room 1, room 2, whatever you'd like. And I want you to just pick a room, join it, and begin to work. I'll float around between these breakout rooms, but go ahead, pick a room. I see you all starting it. I love it. If you need any help, I will, we'll be hanging out here to make sure that you're joined. Get in there. Somebody could be an onboarding plan room 1. Um, Looking lonely. Business plan room 2 would need some people. We got a lot of folks in, still hanging out. If you need me to assign you to rooms, I totally will. All right, how do you pick a room? You should have a pop-up that has a list of different rooms. You click the blue join button next to the room you'd like to join. Or you can just let me know what your choice is and I'll join you. And we're going to have, I should say, 10 minutes. Okay, Aaron, I can join you. Let's put you in. All right, I'll just start assigning folks, okay? All right. I'm going to just assign start assigning people to rooms. Okay. Put you in. And you can come out if you need to for any reason. All right. Anybody not? Okay, if you haven't yet, join the room I assigned to you. You should, you do have to click join when you get the invite. I can't actually physically put you in the room. You do have to join. Taya, I'm gonna go ahead and start popping into these rooms to see how things are going.
Okay.
And I'll just run through and check in on people. Start down the bottom.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Anybody hear me?
Hi, yes, we're currently in breakout rooms. I'm gonna place you in one in a moment.
Oh, I'm actually in one already. I just wanted to ask because the group is wondering if business plan room 2 is wondering if there's anything that you guys are going to provide except for the breakout room because they don't know where to start. I believe you want us to just generate, like, have us use ChatGPT to generate some sort of specific business executive plan,
Yes, that's correct.
like for
And
us creatively come up with a solution using an example of someone's business, right?
yes, that's correct. And then also Isabel will be going into the group as well to provide any additional assistance that you may need.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. No problem.
Bye. My Zoom just crashed. I'm just gonna jump into the group again. Let me see. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Wait, am I, is this the group? The same group?
No, this isn't the group. I can place you in. You were in group. Uh,
Two, I believe. Let me
okay,
see. For business plan.
okay, yeah, I'll
Or
move you in
maybe it
this.
was one. I can't remember exactly. Sorry.
It was two. Gotcha.
If you are here because you got lost out of your breakout room, don't worry about rejoining because we're about to close the breakout rooms. And if you missed out on doing this exercise, there's plenty of time on your own time to go in and practice this. And we're going to just kind of maybe learn from others' experience. We're going to bring everybody back.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Um, those of you who were in one of these breakout rooms, how was what you got to participate in for a minute? Oh, good, Nelson. Okay, we should all be kind of rushing back into the main room after those breakout rooms closed. Everybody back? Most of us coming back. All right. It'd be a big wave of people coming in any minute now. Okay. All right, welcome back. Okay, so who wants to tell me what worked? Besides breakout rooms didn't work. I know that there was some clunkiness about getting into the rooms. Once you were in them, what worked?
Can I say
Please.
what I noticed for GPT? We understand that we need to give it specifics and details. And I think it, an issue that can arise is what exactly are the details. You have to know exactly what you're looking for to get the feedback or the information that you're inquiring about. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very important.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, going back to this metaphor of it's an enthusiastic intern, if you tell your intern, run my social media, how helpful is that going to be? They're going to do, who knows what they're going to do with that. You tell your intern, hey, I want you to post 3 things to Instagram in the next week. And I'm specifically looking at content like this. You'll get a much better result. So it is really helpful to know what you want going in. And that's not always easy. And that's where the SBDC can come in and help, help you be asking for things that will really be useful to you and your business. So great point, Markia. Anybody else? What worked?
I know from experience in the past when I've asked ChatGPT very general questions, it'll give me some crazy information, but also tell me, hey, you need to be more specific,
Yeah.
which is cool because it also understands now that, it can't feed you good information unless you
Hmm.
give it a bunch of details.
Yeah.
Or
It
the
understands
executive
some
summary.
limitations a little bit. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
more than it did a year ago. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
definitely. And you can also tell, in a conversation, you can say, if needed, ask additional questions for clarification. That not every large language model will do that, but ChatGPT will if there's big gaps in what you're asking for versus what you're giving it. Um, Anybody use more than one AI tool and see any differences? I know we didn't get a lot of time, so maybe not. All right. In the interest of time, I want to make sure that I'm taking any questions that come up. Um, would we be interested in working on something like this together? Screen sharing with me and kind of taking one of those projects, one of those documents, and creating it together. Somebody's like,
Sure.
yes. Okay, a couple of
Yes,
yeses. All
yes.
right. All right. We'll spend 5 minutes doing that. We'll see what we get. All right. So I'm going to bring up a new, um, an empty, Here we go. Brand new GPT thread. Okay. How about, I like marketing plan. I think that's a nice applicable to a lot of different kinds of businesses. Let's do a marketing plan. So obviously, anybody want to volunteer a kind of business? I'll make
Let's
one up.
do a bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast. Ooh, I love that. Okay. Build me a marketing plan for a bed and breakfast. I'm going to see how far it goes with a very, very basic, not useful, not detailed prompt. All right. Here we go. They're going to make up, yeah, ChatGPT does have additional capacities beyond just large language model. They do image generation, not with every membership, but so, okay. So it's going to give us tasks. Okay. Basically it's telling me, hey, you didn't really tell us enough to build you a marketing plan. What are we even selling here, right? Identify what your unique selling proposition is, identify your target audience, have an online presence, and here are some ideas for marketing. It's still going. All right. I'll let it finish its thought. Thank you, GPT. And I'm going to ask again with more context. Let me say, make a calendar, a social media calendar with captions and post ideas for a bed and breakfast in the Poconos that has, let's see, 5 bedrooms or 5 rooms, that has charming, unique rooms and access to a lake for canoeing, as well as hiking and other outdoors activities. Target customer persona is honeymooning couples. I misspelled couples and it's not going to matter. It's thinking. Oh, I like that, Carlene. I didn't use that. I'm sorry. I should have used yours. So now it's giving me, I asked it for something more than just, hey, give me a marketing plan. I'm like, okay, I need a specific kind of marketing plan. I need a calendar of social media content for my Poconos bed and breakfast. I could have given it, for instance, more ideas of what platforms I'm active on. I could say, okay, give me a calendar of things to post on Instagram and social and Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok. I could have told it what channels I'm on. I didn't. I just said, give me what you got. So it's giving me caption ideas, an idea for an image or a video, activity spotlight, different kinds of posts, and it's giving me content for, it looks like 3 days a week. I could ask it for more, I could ask it for less, but see, it's giving me very specific language and caption ideas that I don't have to, create on my own. I don't have to necessarily use this all the time, right? But a lot of small business owners who manage their own social media accounts tell me that a pain point for them is coming up with things to say. Is a great way for a great reason to turn to a generative AI model. There's a great question here. As this is all going through, how easy is it to combine various types of generative AI, an image-based with a music-based? It depends on the other platforms, the other systems that you're using. You can always take images it's creating and set it to music if you have that kind of editing software. One thing that you can do, for instance, with this image description is you could, ask ChatGPT to generate an image like this, generate an image fitting this description. Now remember, there's dangers in using AI generated images, right? Because it's not always going to, some customers will not care for that. They will mind, right? But here's what it's slowly loading. Cozy outdoor winter or fall setup. And it remembers I'm marketing an Airbnb, so perfect for a romantic getaway, right? It remembers from earlier on in the thread what I'm trying to do here. So I'm gonna leave it there for now because we've got 5 minutes left and I want to make sure I'm going to answer any questions that come up. One hot tip somebody asked me for, a next step or a piece of advice, and beyond just learning as much as you can about this, looking at your current business, and I like the business model canvas for this. If you've worked with me in the past, I love the business model canvas. You can map out your whole business on a business model canvas. It doesn't even take that long to do. And I'd challenge you to look at each of these elements in your business and think about what areas where are there either rote work, which can be automated, content creation, which can be AI assisted, or what areas are generating data, which you can use an AI to analyze. Great question. And then I'm going to open it up, and I want to just quick ask, thumbs up, thumbs down. Here were our objectives that we had at the beginning of the session. Thumbs up if you think we did them. Did we thumbs up, react if you think we accomplished our objectives? Okay, a lot of folks did. Awesome. If you think we didn't, we are going to share a link to a survey where you can tell us all about what we could do better next time. And we really would like your suggestions. This is the first time we're running this session, but it will not be the last. This has been really interesting for me as well to hear your questions and what's kind of top of mind for you. We may well be running this again, so let us know. Taya, if you could share the link in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. Link to the survey. Oh, she's already got it. Look at that. This is great. It's 3 questions, takes no time, and it'll really help us do an even better job next time. Great comment or question from Catherine here. I'm going to take a couple questions as we're going to end at 1:30, but there's a few minutes left. Are there copyright concerns using generated images? There can be. It's a good idea to ask for sourcing for images, so that if there's something, if you ask it for, give me a T-shirt idea using Philadelphia sports teams logos, yeah, you're going to be worried about getting, some legal action coming your way from the Eagles or the Phillies, right? But if they're trained on copyrighted images, they're not necessarily creating images that are the same as those copywritten images that are their sources. It's a bit of a gray area, but to be safe, ask for the source for those images came from and compare it. How can we collect use cases that have worked for small businesses that are secure and address some of the privacy concerns people have? I'll be honest with you, Uday, that is my biggest question myself, because the biggest benefit I get from coming to webinars like this is hearing ideas for how this has all been working for people. So talk to people in your world. Follow industry leaders in your industry who are talking about AI. Talk to other small businesses. Keep coming back to the SBDC. We might have different use cases to talk about next time. But yeah, it's a work in progress, I would say, and that's some of my clients hate when I say this, but that's the right question to be asking. I don't necessarily have a ready answer. But really solid. Any other questions? I'll take 1 or 2 more if anybody has them. Otherwise, please fill out our survey. Wonderful to have you, and I hope we'll see you again for a future session. We'll probably offer this, fairly regularly.
Thanks, Isabel. No, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh
No
no, please.
question.
In the follow-up, we are going to send out a great resource for selecting AI tools based on industry that was put together by our statewide PSBDC network. You'll get that in an email along with the deck. And awesome. I'm glad, Bradley, that you found the seminar and the tools helpful. Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure being here with you, and I hope that we'll talk to each other soon.
Hello. Also, the questionnaire
Mhm.
where it says that you can click several options, it does not let you do that. It only lets you choose one.
Oh, that's a good note. Thank you for telling me. We'll
You're
look
welcome.
into fixing that for the next time.
Excellent. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Isabel, is it okay then if we email you to get more specific information
Certainly.
regarding our own business?
Absolutely. If you are outside of the SBDC service area, I might just loop in, somebody in your local SBDC. But if you're a Temple client, we can talk all day long about this. Email me all you like.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Really
Oh,
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
I just had a question. How do we become a Temple client? I think I was one like years ago. I even used to work there, but I fell out of the loop. So I don't know how to
Oh,
connect
I
back.
love that question. All right. If you're here, there's a good chance you either are an SBDC client there's a good chance you
Okay.
are a client of some SBDC. It might be us. It might be, one that's more local to you. But if you're in Philadelphia
Temple.
or Montgomery counties, my friend, you are a Temple SBDC client. Email me to
Okay.
get started.
Cool. Thank you so much. This is great.
I'm glad.
All
I'm
right. Have
glad.
a good day. Bye.
You too. All right, I'm going to close this up. I think we're all just doing happy thank yous, which is great. But thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to wrap this up, and we'll be in touch within a week or two with follow-up materials, and hope to see you all back here sometime soon. Take care.